Midnight doesn't arrive loudly. It drifts in, quietly, like a soft blanket settling over the world. The house was wrapped in that kind of silence. Not empty. Just calm. A single lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, casting warm amber light across the walls. Shadows stretched gently along the floor, unmoving. Outside, the neighborhood slept. No cars. No voices. Only the distant hum of night. On the couch, Emily shifted slightly and exhaled. One hand rested on her belly. The other held a mug that had already gone cold. Pregnancy had changed her sense of time. Nights felt longer now, slower. Her body no longer followed the clock the way it used to. Sleep came in fragments, and sometimes, like tonight, it didn't come at all. She wasn't uncomfortable. Just awake. Emily leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the quiet. The soft tick of the wall clock. The faint sound of the heater cycling on and off. Familiar sounds. Comforting ones. She smiled faintly. These late hours had become her private moments. A time to breathe. To think. To feel the small movements beneath her palm, gentle reminders that she wasn't alone. A slow inhale. A slow exhale. On the floor near the couch, Max lay stretched out on his side. He was usually asleep by this hour. Deep asleep. The kind where his paws twitched and his ears flicked at invisible dreams. But tonight, his eyes were open. Not wide. Not alert. Just open. Max lifted his head slightly, resting his chin on his paws. His ears angled forward, not stiff, not alarmed, just attentive. His breathing was slow and steady, but his focus had sharpened. He wasn't looking at the door. He wasn't listening to the outside. He was watching Emily. The room stayed peaceful. Nothing changed. No sudden sounds. No movements. The warm light remained steady. Emily shifted again, adjusting a pillow behind her back. Max's ears twitched. He rose to his feet quietly. No rush. No tension. Just a smooth, deliberate movement, as if he had made a decision. His nails made a soft clicking sound as he crossed the floor. Emily noticed him out of the corner of her eye. She smiled. "Hey, buddy." Her voice was low. Gentle. Almost a whisper. Max stopped in front of her, standing close enough that his nose brushed her knee. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't sit right away. He just stood there. Emily reached down and ran her fingers through the fur along his neck. It was warm. Familiar. Grounding. "You can't sleep either?" she murmured. Max didn't respond the way he usually did. He didn't lean into her hand. Didn't shift for more scratches. Instead, he slowly lowered himself. And sat. Right in front of her. His eyes lifted to meet hers. There was something different in them. Not fear. Not excitement. Focus. Emily felt her smile fade, not into worry, but into curiosity. She tilted her head slightly. "What is it?" Max let out a soft sound. Not a bark. Not a whine. Something quieter. Almost like a breath pushed gently through his chest. Then he leaned forward. His head rested against her belly. Emily froze. Not from panic. From surprise. Her hand instinctively moved, fingers spreading protectively over her stomach. She could feel Max's warmth through the fabric of her shirt. His breathing was slow. Intentional. He stayed very still. Too still. Emily swallowed. "Max," she whispered. The baby gave a small movement beneath her palm. A familiar flutter. Normally, that alone would have reassured her. But something about this moment felt different. The house was still calm. The light was still warm. Nothing looked wrong. Yet Max didn't move away. His ears flicked once. Then again. Emily's heart began to beat a little faster, not racing, just louder. More noticeable. She studied him now. The set of his shoulders. The way his body angled toward her. Protective. Grounded. Purposeful. "You're okay," she said softly, though she wasn't sure who she was reassuring, him or herself. Max remained where he was. Emily shifted her legs slightly. Max adjusted immediately, staying close, keeping contact. She felt it then, not fear, but awareness. A gentle sense that she should pay attention. She took a slow breath. The clock ticked. Time moved on, but the moment held. Emily looked down at Max again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is there something you want me to know?" Max didn't answer. He simply rested his head more firmly against her belly. And stayed. And in that quiet midnight stillness, Emily felt it. A subtle shift. A knowing she couldn't explain. She didn't understand it yet. But she would. Because what Max sensed in that moment was not random. And his behavior had a meaning no one expected. The minutes passed. Softly. Almost unnoticed. Emily stayed still on the couch, afraid that even the smallest movement might break whatever was happening. Max's head remained against her belly, his body relaxed but alert, as if he were listening to something far beyond the quiet room. The house hadn't changed. The night hadn't changed. But Max had. Emily shifted her hand slowly, resting it on his head. His fur felt familiar under her fingers, thick, warm, steady. Usually, at a touch like that, he would lean in, tail thumping softly against the floor. Tonight, he didn't. He accepted the touch without reaction, eyes half-lidded, attention fixed somewhere deep and unseen. Emily frowned slightly. "Hey," she whispered. "What's going on with you?" Her voice carried no fear. Just curiosity. The kind that grows when something feels different but not dangerous. Max lifted his head just enough to look at her again. Their eyes met. There was a calm seriousness in his gaze that made her chest tighten, not painfully, just enough to notice. He wasn't asking for comfort. He wasn't asking to go outside. He wasn't asking for anything at all. He was telling her something. Emily didn't know how she knew that. She just did. Max stood up slowly, turned once in a small circle, then sat again, closer this time. His shoulder pressed lightly against her leg. He angled his body so he was facing her fully, placing himself between her and the open space of the room. A quiet, instinctive gesture. Emily let out a soft breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That's new," she murmured. She glanced toward the hallway, then the front door. Nothing. No sounds. No shadows. No reason for concern. Still. Max's posture stayed firm. Not stiff. Not tense. Protective. Emily shifted forward slightly, resting both feet on the floor now. Her body followed his lead without conscious thought, moving from rest into awareness. She noticed her breathing first. A little shallower than before. Then her heartbeat, steady, but more present. She placed both hands on her belly again. The baby moved. A gentle roll. Familiar, but this time it came with a strange sense of timing, as if responding to Max's presence. Emily smiled faintly. "Guess you're on night duty tonight, huh?" she whispered. Max's ears flicked at the sound of her voice. He didn't relax. He didn't move away. Instead, he lowered his head again, carefully, deliberately resting it against her belly once more. And then he stayed there. Minutes passed like that. The clock ticked. The heater hummed softly. The lamp cast the same warm glow. But Emily's thoughts had shifted. She wasn't drifting anymore. She wasn't half asleep. Her attention was fully present now, tuned into the small details, the weight of Max's head, the rhythm of his breathing, the way his body seemed anchored to hers. She remembered reading once that dogs could sense changes humans couldn't. Subtle things. Chemical changes. Emotional shifts. She had smiled at the idea back then. Thought it sounded comforting, but abstract. Now. It felt personal. Emily brushed her thumb along Max's ear. "You're being very serious," she whispered. Max responded with a slow blink. Not anxious. Not restless. Just certain. Emily leaned back slightly, eyes lifting to the ceiling. She tried to scan her body, checking for pain, discomfort, anything out of place. Nothing felt wrong. And yet, something felt important. Her curiosity deepened, replacing the last traces of late-night drowsiness. She trusted Max completely. He had been with her through moves, job changes, quiet weekends, loud celebrations. He had never acted like this before. That alone mattered. Emily sat there, listening not to the room, but to him. To the quiet language of posture and presence. To the unspoken message he seemed determined to share. Whatever it was. It wasn't urgent in a loud way. It was urgent in a gentle one. And as the night continued to hold its breath, Emily found herself doing something she hadn't planned. She began to trust her dog's intuition. Even before she understood it. Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. 12:47 a.m. Later than she thought. The number lingered in her mind for a moment, then faded, replaced by the quiet weight of awareness settling in her chest. Sleep was no longer an option. Not now. Not with Max sitting so close, his presence steady and intentional. She adjusted her position on the couch again, slowly, carefully. Max responded instantly, shifting just enough to stay pressed against her leg. He never took his eyes off her. That was when she felt it clearly. This wasn't coincidence. Her hand rested on her belly, fingers splayed, as if anchoring herself. The baby moved again, not sharply, not urgently, just a gentle reminder of life continuing its rhythm. Emily smiled softly. "There you are," she whispered. Max's ears flicked. He lifted his head and looked at her face, then lowered his gaze toward her stomach once more. The movement was subtle, almost reverent. Emily swallowed. Her comfort, once automatic, had transformed into curiosity. A quiet, growing question that refused to be ignored. She tried to think logically. Maybe he hears something. Maybe he smells something unfamiliar. She listened. Nothing. She inhaled slowly. The room smelled the same, clean laundry, faint vanilla from a candle burned earlier in the evening. Still. Max remained unmoved. Emily leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on her knees now. Her posture mirrored his, attentive, grounded, present. She studied the details she'd never really noticed before, the way his chest rose evenly with each breath, the way his eyes softened when they flicked up to meet hers. "You've never done this," she murmured. "Not like this?" Max didn't react to the words. He reacted to her tone. His tail gave a slow, single sweep against the floor, barely a movement, but enough to feel intentional. Emily exhaled. Her curiosity deepened, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt guiding. Like being gently nudged toward a realization she hadn't reached yet. She placed her palm flat against her belly again. This time, she paid closer attention. There it was. A sensation she hadn't noticed before, or maybe had, but dismissed. Not pain. Not exactly discomfort. Pressure. Subtle. Easy to overlook. Emily's brow furrowed. She whispered. Max lifted his head immediately, eyes sharpening just a little. Not alarmed. Just alert. Emily shifted again, testing the feeling. The pressure didn't increase, but it didn't disappear either. Her heartbeat picked up slightly. She took a slow breath, grounding herself. It's probably nothing, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Max didn't relax. He stayed exactly where he was. Emily felt something change inside her then, not fear, not panic, but respect. Respect for the way he was holding the moment. For the way he refused to let her brush it off. She reached out and rested her hand on his shoulder. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'm listening. Max's body softened just a fraction. Not relief, acknowledgement. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment and focused inward. On her breathing. On the sensations she'd ignored before because they didn't fit into the category of urgent. Her curiosity had fully replaced comfort now. She opened her eyes. The room looked the same. Warm. Safe. Still. But she wasn't the same. She sat there, awake and aware, guided by the quiet certainty of a dog who knew something she didn't yet understand. And for the first time that night, Emily considered that this moment might matter more than she realized. Emily shifted her weight carefully and sat upright. The movement was slow, intentional, as if her body already knew to be cautious. Max adjusted with her, never breaking contact. His shoulder pressed against her leg, steady and reassuring. He wasn't crowding her. He wasn't restless. He was present. Emily rested her hands on her belly again and closed her eyes for a moment. She listened to her breathing, to the quiet house, to the subtle signals she usually ignored in the rush of daily life. The pressure was still there. Not stronger. Not weaker. Just persistent. She opened her eyes and looked down at Max. You feel it too, don't you? She whispered. Max didn't move, but his ears angled forward slightly, as if acknowledging her words. His calm confidence wrapped around her like a steady hand on her back. Emily felt something soften in her chest. Trust. Not the blind kind. The earned kind. She reached out and brushed her fingers along the side of his face. His eyes fluttered closed for just a second, then opened again, focused, gentle, grounded. I'm glad you're here, she murmured. Her voice cracked slightly, not with fear, but with emotion she hadn't expected. Pregnancy had made her more sensitive, more aware of connections she once took for granted. And this bond, felt deeper than ever before. Emily leaned back against the couch cushions and let her head rest. The lamp's warm light traced the edges of the room, catching dust motes drifting slowly through the air. Everything felt suspended, as if the night itself had paused to watch. Max lowered himself to the floor again, curling slightly but keeping his head pressed against her leg. One paw rested near her foot, close enough to feel his warmth. Minutes passed. Emily noticed how her breathing naturally slowed to match his. How her heartbeat steadied when she focused on his presence. How the pressure in her body felt, manageable, when she didn't ignore it. She remembered the early days of her pregnancy, the uncertainty, the questions, the constant checking in with herself. Somewhere along the way, comfort had replaced awareness. Now, awareness was returning. Emily reached for her phone on the side table. The screen lit up softly, casting a cool glow across her face. She didn't open any apps. She just held it, considering. Max lifted his head and looked at the phone. Then back at her. The message was clear. She didn't need to rush. But she shouldn't ignore this either. Emily set the phone back down, exhaling slowly. Okay, she said softly. One step at a time. Max settled again, satisfied, for now. Emily shifted her legs slightly and noticed the pressure change, just enough to catch her attention. Her brows knit together. She placed one hand on her belly and one on the couch for support. Her body was speaking. Quietly. Politely. And for the first time that night, she was fully listening. Max stayed close, his presence steady and unwavering. No barking. No pacing. No panic. Just trust. Just connection. Emily felt it then, the emotional thread tying them together in this moment. A shared purpose. A silent agreement. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And in that warm, quiet room, the bond between a woman and her dog deepened into something unshakable. Emily didn't stand up right away. She stayed seated, letting the moment settle. The room felt warmer now. Not in temperature, but in presence. The lamp's glow seemed softer, more intentional, as if it were there to witness rather than illuminate. Max shifted closer, his side pressed firmly against her calf, grounding her. Emily placed both hands on her belly and took a slow breath in through her nose, then let it out through her mouth. The pressure returned. Still gentle. Still quiet. But no longer ignorable. She tilted her head slightly, listening inward. It wasn't pain. It wasn't sharp. It felt more like a signal, subtle, patient, waiting to be acknowledged. Her heart beat a little louder in her ears. I think, she murmured, then stopped. She didn't finish the thought. Max lifted his head. Emily looked down at him, meeting his eyes. There was no urgency there. No fear. Only steady assurance, as if he were saying, yes, that's it, keep listening. She shifted forward and placed her feet flat on the floor again. This time, when she stood, she did it slowly, one hand braced on the arm of the couch. Max rose instantly. Not ahead of her. Not behind her. Beside her. The pressure changed slightly as she stood enough to make her pause. She rested her hand against the wall, grounding herself. Max leaned gently into her leg. I'm okay, she whispered. I've got you. Or maybe, you've got me. She took a few careful steps toward the kitchen. The tiles felt cool under her feet, a contrast to the warmth in her body. Max stayed close, matching her pace step for step. At the counter, Emily poured herself a glass of water. The sound of it filling the glass felt unusually loud in the quiet house. She took a small sip. The pressure eased, just a little. She exhaled. Okay, she whispered again. That helps. Max watched her intently, ears relaxed now but still attentive. He sat when she sat at the kitchen table, positioning himself where he could see her face clearly. Emily rested her forearms on the table and closed her eyes. Memories surfaced, small moments from the past few weeks she hadn't given much thought to. Feeling more tired than usual. Waking up restless. Moments of discomfort she had brushed aside because they didn't fit a dramatic narrative. None of it felt alarming on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. Emily opened her eyes. Max tilted his head slightly, reading her shift in energy. I think you noticed before I did, she said quietly. Max's tail gave a slow, gentle thump. Emily smiled, just a little. She reached down and rested her hand on his head, letting her fingers linger there. His fur was warm. Solid. Real. Her breathing slowed again. The pressure returned once more, subtle, steady. Not escalating, but consistent. Emily sat with it. No panic. No rushing thoughts. Just awareness. She glanced at her phone again, still resting on the table. This time, the idea of using it didn't feel intrusive. It felt responsible. Not yet. But soon. Max watched her, then gently lowered his head to rest against her knee. A quiet reminder to stay grounded. Emily placed one hand on her belly and one on his back. Everything was aligning now. Her body. His intuition. The quiet signal she'd almost ignored. This wasn't a crisis. It was a message. And as the night continued to hold its gentle stillness, Emily understood something important. The answers weren't arriving all at once. They were unfolding, softly, patiently, exactly when she was ready to receive them. Emily sat quietly at the kitchen table for a long moment. The house felt different now. Not threatening. Just attentive. As if everything around her was listening. Max stayed close, his body relaxed but his awareness sharp. His head rested against her knee, grounding her in the present. Every time she shifted slightly, he adjusted with her, silent, precise, reassuring. Emily placed her hand on her belly again. This time, the sensation changed. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. But enough. She drew in a slow breath and felt it catch halfway through. The pressure had become more defined now, still gentle, but unmistakable. It wasn't something to ignore anymore. Her expression softened, not into fear, but into understanding. "Oh," she whispered. Max lifted his head immediately. Their eyes met. Something passed between them in that moment, recognition. Not panic. Not urgency. Just clarity. Emily closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself. She remembered the voice of her doctor from earlier visits. Listen to your body. Even small changes matter. She opened her eyes again. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. I hear you." She reached for her phone. The screen lit up the room with a soft glow. Max didn't react negatively. He didn't tense. If anything, his posture eased just a fraction. Emily scrolled to her doctor's number and paused, her thumb hovering. She wasn't scared. She was resolved. She placed the phone to her ear. It rang once, then twice. While she waited, Max stood and moved closer, pressing his side gently against her leg. His presence felt like a steady hand reminding her to breathe. The call connected. Emily spoke calmly, clearly, describing what she was feeling, no dramatics, no panic. Just facts. Sensations. Timing. She listened carefully as the voice on the other end responded. Max watched her face. As Emily listened, her expression shifted again, not into worry, but into validation. A quiet confirmation that trusting this moment had been the right choice. She nodded slowly, even though the person on the other end couldn't see her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can do that." She ended the call and lowered the phone, resting it on the table. For a moment, she just sat there. Then she exhaled a long, steady breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Max stepped forward and rested his head against her thigh again. She reached down and ran her fingers through his fur, her hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. "You knew," she whispered. Max's tail gave a slow, gentle sweep across the floor. Emily smiled, eyes glistening. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't panicking. She was grateful. Grateful that she hadn't dismissed the signs. Grateful that she hadn't been alone. Grateful that her dog had spoken up, in the only way he knew how. She stood slowly, preparing herself for what came next, not rushed, not afraid. Just ready. And in that quiet kitchen, under the soft glow of the overhead light, Emily understood the truth. This moment, this choice to listen, had changed everything. And it all began with a dog who refused to stay silent. The drive was quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet, but the focused kind. Streetlights passed in slow rhythm, their warm glow sliding across the windshield and fading behind them. Emily sat upright in the passenger seat, one hand resting on her belly, the other curled loosely in her lap. Max sat in the back seat. Still. Alert. Watching. Every now and then, Emily felt the pressure again, subtle, steady, unchanged. No spike. No sudden shift. Just enough to remind her that paying attention had been the right choice. She breathed slowly. In, out. Max's presence filled the car, even without a sound. She could feel him there, anchored, certain, calm. When they arrived, the building was softly lit, quiet at this hour. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Just calm professionalism wrapped in nighttime stillness. Emily moved carefully, listening to her body the same way she had learned to listen to Max step by step. Breath by breath. Inside, everything felt measured. Gentle voices. Warm lights. Reassuring rhythms. Emily explained again what she had noticed. What she had felt. How it hadn't been dramatic, but persistent. And how her dog had refused to leave her side. There was no rush in the response. No alarm. Just attentive listening. Emily sat quietly as things were checked, each moment calm, respectful, unhurried. Max waited nearby, eyes following her every movement, his body relaxed but aware. Then came the explanation. Clear. Gentle. Grounded. A subtle condition. Easy to miss. One that often hides behind normal sensations, especially at night, when the body is quiet and signals are easy to overlook. Emily listened closely. Not with fear, but with relief. Because the words that followed mattered most. You came in early. You listened. That made all the difference. Emily closed her eyes briefly. A breath escaped her, soft, emotional, grateful. She thought back to the couch. The lamp. The quiet room. Max's head resting against her belly. She opened her eyes again. Max met her gaze from across the room. She smiled. He hadn't panicked. He hadn't overreacted. He had simply known, and stayed. And in doing so, he had given her the space to listen to herself. The truth settled gently into her chest. This wasn't about luck. Or coincidence. It was about intuition. Connection. Trust. And the quiet power of paying attention, before a whisper becomes something louder. Morning arrived without urgency. Not with alarms, not with noise, but with light. A soft ribbon of daylight slipped through the curtains and settled across the room, warming the walls that had held the night so carefully. The quiet was different now. Fuller. Easier. The kind of silence that follows understanding. Emily stirred slowly. Her body felt tired, but not heavy. The sharp edge of uncertainty that had followed her through the night was gone, replaced by a steady calm that rested deep in her chest. She breathed in, then out, and felt how smoothly the air moved through her lungs. No tension. No holding back. Her hand drifted to her belly, resting there without thought. The baby moved gently beneath her palm, a familiar reassurance that made her smile. Everything felt aligned. She turned her head slightly. Max lay nearby. Curled on his side, paws tucked in, chest rising and falling in a slow, even rhythm. The intensity that had anchored him through the night had softened into rest. True rest. The kind that comes after purpose has been fulfilled. Emily watched him for a long moment. She noticed the small details, the way one ear folded slightly at the tip, the faint twitch of his whiskers as he dreamed, the steady confidence in the way he took up space. He looked peaceful now. Complete. Hey, she whispered. Her voice was barely sound at all. Max's ear flicked. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. When they found her, there was no urgency in them anymore. No focus. Just warmth. He lifted his head and stretched, joints popping softly as he rose and padded toward her. He stopped close, pressing his head gently against her arm. Emily's throat tightened. She reached out and rested her hand on his head, fingers sinking into the familiar warmth of his fur. "Thank you," she said quietly. The words were simple. But they carried everything. Max sighed a deep, content sound and leaned into her touch. No message now. No warning. Just closeness. Emily closed her eyes. Gratitude moved through her slowly, like warmth spreading after cold. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that stays. She thought back to the night before. The couch. The lamp. The way the world had felt suspended in stillness. She remembered how easy it would have been to ignore the moment. To dismiss the signs because they weren't loud or frightening. To tell herself it was nothing and wait until morning. She opened her eyes again. Max met her gaze. You didn't let me do that, she whispered. His tail gave a slow, lazy thump. Later that morning, they returned home. The front door closed behind them with a familiar click, and Emily paused just inside the entryway. The house greeted her the same way it always had, with quiet comfort, with familiarity, but it felt different now. Not changed. Enriched. Sunlight filled the living room, illuminating the couch where everything had begun. The lamp was off now, unnecessary in the daylight, but Emily's eyes lingered on it for a moment. She set her bag down and moved slowly, intentionally, into the room. Max followed, staying close but no longer vigilant. She sat on the couch and let herself sink into the cushions. Max settled at her feet. Emily rested her hands on her belly again, breathing deeply. The tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for weeks released its hold on her body. She hadn't just been tired. She had been listening without knowing how. Now she did. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her face. The future no longer felt distant or uncertain. It felt closer. Tangible. Possible. Max shifted slightly, adjusting his position, then went still again. His presence filled the space, not in volume, but in meaning. Emily thought about how people often talk about dogs. As pets. As companions. As loyal friends. All true. But incomplete. Sometimes, they are bridges. Between instinct and awareness. Between silence and understanding. Between what we feel and what we choose to hear. Emily opened her eyes and looked down at Max again. He wasn't watching her now. He was resting. His job was done. A small laugh escaped her, not loud, just breath and sound combined. You can relax, she murmured. I've got it from here. Max's tail tapped the floor once, then stilled. The afternoon passed gently. Emily moved through the house at an unhurried pace, pausing often, listening to her body with a new respect. She drank water. She rested when she needed to. She noticed the subtle shifts she might once have ignored. Awareness had become a gift, not a burden. Every so often, she caught Max watching her, not with intensity, but with quiet approval. As if he were checking in, then deciding everything was exactly as it should be. As evening approached, the light softened again, painting the walls with warm gold. Emily returned to the living room and sat in her favorite spot. The same spot. Different meaning. She placed both hands on her belly and smiled, feeling a gentle movement beneath her palms. Her heart filled with a quiet certainty. I promise, she whispered. I'll keep listening. Max lifted his head at the sound of her voice, then rested his chin back down, content. Outside, the world continued on, cars passing, neighbors returning home, life unfolding in its usual rhythm. Inside, everything was steady. There was no dramatic ending to the story. No sirens. No rush. No fear. Just a midnight moment that mattered. Just a dog who trusted his instincts. And a woman who chose to listen. Emily leaned back, eyes soft, breathing even. She felt safe, not because nothing could go wrong, but because she knew she would pay attention. Because she wasn't alone. Max shifted closer, his body a warm, familiar weight near her feet. Emily smiled again, a hand resting protectively over her belly. Healing doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it arrives quietly. With a nudge. With a presence. With a moment that asks us to pause and hear what's been whispering all along. And because she listened, everything moved gently toward peace.